Is it good? Go, yes. It's good. Go. Anyway, so the thing is two paths, one choice, and it comes out of Matthew 7, and this is kind of the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And yeah, interesting. I was reading today on the Sermon on the Mount, and I thought you see different things. It was Jesus took his disciples up to talk to, and so he was really talking to disciples. But then I've thought, and it says here, probably more of a crowd gathered around too. And so, how many people were there? Exactly who it was, but he started out just carried his disciples up there, which would have meant he's actually teaching them this is how you want to think. But then some of it seems more than that. So, but anyway, two paths, one choice, and you look at just what we hear, and I mean what you said about a bill of goods, and you see the politicians, and you think, how in the world can you ever tell what's real? I mean, when you listen to those guys, and it's just crazy. I mean, you got, the Donald, and you got Hillary, and you got all these people talking with authority, and it's like, then they're saying absolute opposites, and none of them act like, I mean, it's just, you catch them in lies constantly when you really listen to them. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you know who is real, who's not real? And we've been in it quite some time, us older folks. For younger people, whatever, how do you know who's real? I mean, how do you know what's facts, what's not facts? And I think this is where we get to, and I mean, it's what Rubio was talking about with anyone. The real path, those true Christians, we kind of have to do the right thing, don't we? But I'll say before we start, so why do we have to do the right thing?
Yeah, we are directed to do the right thing. According to Scripture, yes, that you do right. It's mandate.
And I think it's maybe even stronger than mandated. And this is going to say, when we get there, a good tree can't produce bad fruit. Now we're going to get there, but that's the kind of tough one to figure, isn't it? I mean, is that real? A good tree can't produce bad fruit. Also says a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So when we talk about, again, I say, why do we, as a Christian, why do you do the right thing? Do you always do it because you thought about it and said, I want to do the right thing? Do you always make a choice to do the right thing?
I think if you're a true Christian, you have the Holy Spirit. To me, that's what directs me. Don't do something right, I get kind of edgy about it.
You get to where the default is to do the right thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your root system changes from good trees to bad trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Is you're deeper than just making a choice. I made a choice to go with Jesus, didn't I? After that, do I really have a choice? We talked about this before, but after I've truly become one of Christ, do I really have a choice where I go? We talked about this several times. I keep saying. So what did Jesus say he's going to do? What did God say will happen to us? He says, I will be transformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ. Doesn't say you can if you want to. Doesn't say, he just says you will be transformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ so you can enter his kingdom. How? So you can enter his kingdom. How? Come on, man. Someone knows that.
You have to be righteous to enter his kingdom.
Yeah, as brothers and sisters, as inheritors, right? That's what God says. I'm going to make you like Jesus. So when you enter my kingdom, you can truly inherit that kingdom. And so we don't really have a choice once we're doing it. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about, that two paths, one choice. But like I say, he gets a little firmer towards the end. Not like last time where he basically said no one's going to be good enough. That's not what this lesson is. This lesson is few are going to make the right decision. But then he's going to tell, once you have made the right decision, how we're going to actually know you're those people. And I think that's very important today. You hear all this political stuff. How do we know? So just look on the surface. I mean, we'll say the Donald, false prophet, not false prophet.
He admitted this week that he didn't know Jesus. He knew about him, but he didn't know him
And
personally.
when you hear him, does he do anything that would make you think he's really righteous? I mean, really. And you talk about the bad fruit, good fruit. Would you ever pick anything off of Donald's tree?
If I knew it.
And the answer is no. You know that is now, can he have stuff on there that looks good?
He says what people want to hear.
And
For
we'll
sure.
talk, I mean, I say then while we're doing it, let's just talk about Obama. Good tree, bad tree. And how do you know?
His actions.
By his actions. They're not consistently good, are they? Now he can say, boy, look what good I'm doing. But he lies when he says it, and we catch him in those lies. And so you can look and see that's a bad tree. So do you want to buy anything off that bad tree? No. And we started talking about false prophets here. So how do those false prophets work? Want to know what propaganda is? How's propaganda work?
Mhm.
Well, mostly through repetition,
Okay.
brainwashing. Usually subtle repetition.
And the basis of propaganda actually is most of those people know everything they say is not right. So what do? They flood you with wrong stuff. And then as intelligent people, what do? Well, we say half of that is obviously incorrect. I'm throwing that away. But what do we do with the other half? We accept it. Because we say, surely he couldn't be all bad. Isn't that what we think? What's this going to say? Surely not only can you be all bad, but you are either all bad or you're all good. And so once you say this is false, you've got to discard all of it, and that's how propaganda happens. So you look at anyone, I guess, else. What about Rubio? I don't really know him from anyone. Do you see things? I heard that great speech he made. Has anyone seen things that would tell you that's a false prophet? Yeah, I don't know, but I think you should be able to look and see, shouldn't you? You should be able to go back and read if you want to know, has he really got that faith? You should be able to look back and say, every time I've seen he has responded as a man of Christ throughout the thing. And if you don't, then you have to question what path he's on. So that's what we're going to talk about here, is how to find those paths. And he has three different things that Jesus talks about here. And the first one is narrow versus wide, and this is Matthew 7. This is 13 and 14. And we talked about this, or I have talked about it quite a bit through things, but 13, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who go through it. How narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it. So why is the gate narrow? Why? I mean, if I go back, if I'm God, am I going to make the gate narrow? Why did he make it like that?
It's only one right way to get through it. It's gonna be a big wide thing to carry everything with you.
Yeah.
Do you think he meant to cut the herd, so to speak?
I've often thought that this, when he says this like that it's more of a description of the sin nature that
That most people will go to hell instead of heaven.
this gate size, this road size is, I guess, describing human nature, the sin nature. And that means enter through a narrow gate means that that's going to be difficult for most people because they won't subscribe to the plan. If I make that complicated.
And how I say most of the things we do that require discipline are like that, though, aren't they? I mean, most of the things that require discipline, whether it's financial, in your relationship, whatever. If I'm gonna say I'm gonna do the right thing, it is a narrow path, isn't it? I mean, you've got to keep your eye and say, no, I'm gonna do the right thing. You know, talk about finances. Okay, I'm gonna save money. I'm gonna do the right thing, but boy, I really want that. We got to look the other way, don't we? And so why find the narrow gate, or why do we want to find the narrow gate? And I'll read it again. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is broad that leads to destruction. How narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it. So why do we want to find the narrow gate?
Because we're alive.
Because we want life, and that's it. And what's the other gate lead to?
Destruction.
And that's tough. Just describe what is the wide gate these days? What's that wide road? We see it all the time. What's that wide road right now?
The easy way. The easy way, whatever.
It's not always the easy way, though. It's just not
Well,
God's way.
There's a higher price, though, to go through the narrow.
There is. And sometimes that price is not so, I think it's still live there. It's just not showing. So I think you can leave it. I just talk about for the right to life stuff. What's difficult about that for us? I saw that today. People smiling in the paper doing a right to life protest, and they're having a great big old time. Easy or hard for me to say, no, you're wrong? Well, I have to call a lot of people that in their head would never consider themselves murderers. But that's what I have to call them, isn't it? I have to choose, step out and say, guess what? What you're doing is leading to destruction and death. And it's not okay. But we talked about it. But how do I have to do that? By blowing up the abortion clinics? How do I have to do it?
Love.
I have to do it in the same way I intended, and that's what's so difficult. And so that wide gate now is human right. It's all rights. Well, I have the right to do whatever I want to do as long as it's not harming anyone. I have the right. you know what's wrong with homosexual marriage? I have the right to that, and I'm not hurting a soul. And in fact, I'm going to go to church. And in fact, I'm a preacher, and I'm. Well, what about that?
It's against God's laws.
Yeah, that's that wide road that you look at and you say it's not so bad, is it? You see what I mean? That's that fruit that you look at, and we're going to talk again. What fruit do you see there? Do you see bad fruit on that? And what is that bad fruit? You just said it. What tells me that's bad fruit?
Well, it goes against God's law.
Because it violates God's law. But there's lots of good fruit on that tree, isn't it? Isn't there good fruit on that tree?
It looks good.
It's deceiving, isn't it? And that's what we're going to talk about. Two paths. Narrow, wide, no more. There's not a place where they run together. There's not a place where we're all going to enter here and at the end come out here, is it? No, the narrow gate, we've got to enter it and say, I'm going to follow this or not. And that's the really difficult thing is it's so difficult because we have to follow it in every way. And that's what's difficult. If I'm going to produce good fruit, I have to produce that good fruit all the time. And boy, is that, I won't say tough, what is it? Yeah, it's impossible, isn't it?
You know, we get, and you'll get labeled, of course, being a fanatic or narrow-minded, because when gay couples adopt children, well, the beauty of that is like, oh, there's a child that's being loved and is in a better place than they were, you know, and probably so. And then they throw that back at you and say, see, you should not be against that because they're taking a child that might have been in a terrible environment and now they're in a better environment. And so they lay the guilt trip on you, and that's how they tend to win people over. And
so what is the truth?
truth is they're not living by God's law and going against what the Bible says a union should be, like it or not.
And so they're on that road that leads to destruction,
And
not that road that leads to life.
and all the studies that I have, you know, I teach this area right here in one of my courses. All the scientific studies show that children that grow up with homosexual parents turn out no different than any other kids. You know what? That they don't have enough data to show that.
That's going wrong.
And anyway, I'm just saying that's what's being put into the students this day and age, is that all of that stuff is fine and dandy because it's better than it was for children.
So
All the time.
So
It's
we're,
all on TV.
we're fixing to talk about it, but again, it is you see good and bad fruit, don't you? You see good stuff there. Gosh, we're going to love, and in fact, we're going to get along with everyone. We're going to allow everyone to have their rights. We're going to get along with everyone, and that is better than God's way, isn't it? Well, and it's really, we must have interpreted God's way somewhere wrong, because surely God didn't mean it that way. God is love. Surely God didn't mean it that way. Isn't that right?
That's what they throw back at you.
That's how it comes to us. And what is there? And that's what I want us to think. What are you seeing there? You're seeing a tree with good and bad fruit, aren't you?
That's that
You think?
wide and narrow gate road right there.
Yeah. I mean, you see that, but is it truly good fruit? No, it can't be. And we're going to talk about that because it's not God's way. And what does God say again? Is he, we'll talk about the narrow gate. So is God narrow-minded?
Yes.
Yes. Is God
My way or the highway.
That's
That's
exactly,
it right there. It's like, if it's not God's will, it's Satan's will.
that's right.
My way or
And that's the thing when we talk about, and it's why Rubio would have said, I have to behave right. Why? Because I've chosen God's way and I can't go any other way. I realize God is not the God that encompasses everyone and comforts everyone. God says, here's God talking right now, and through Jesus is, for the gate is wide, the road is broad that leads to destruction. How narrow is the gate and difficult is the road that leads to life, and few find it. I mean, he's making nothing to make excuses for the fact that few of you out there are going to enter my kingdom. And that's tough. So now we're going to talk about good versus bad, and a little more of how you know maybe if you're on that path and if others are on that path. So this is 15 through 21. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are raging wolves. You will recognize them by their fruit. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, neither can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire, so you'll recognize them by their fruit. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. That's kind of tough, isn't it? And I'll say, last week, to me, the tough part, more judgmental, more where it tend for me to say, yeah, well, I'm good, but y'all aren't. And I meet up, but y'all don't. This isn't like this, is it? I mean, this just says I'm either one or the other. I'm not in between. So beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are raging wolves. Who is that today?
Our leaders from that. Good grief. TV, computer,
Just about everything.
it's all around us, everything.
Yeah, we're surrounded.
Pastor.
A lot of pastors, I think. Anyone heard a pastor anywhere say something that's not biblical?
How often do you hear the plan of salvation from Pastor or in our own pulpit? You five, 4 times.
Well, that's one hand.
And it is interesting when you hear a pastor say something maybe not quite biblical. What do we usually do then? Do you turn it off? Or you kind of think, oh, he must have just misinterpreted that one little part, don't we? Who else are they? Democrats.
Us,
I mean, really, think of the politicians. Again, can you tell them? What are they promoting?
Their agenda.
Themselves.
Their agenda and themselves and maybe world peace and love
False
and all.
promises.
Yeah. It usually boils down to who is sponsoring them,
Mhm.
and that's how they get directed. It's like who is giving them the money.
So
Trump
this,
doesn't have anybody giving him money.
Right.
So
and they're telling what they think the majority of the voters want to hear.
Yeah.
It's like,
so the second verse was, you'll recognize them by their fruit. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So what is that fruit?
Showing
Let me read the next one so we can talk more. In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but a bad tree produces bad fruit.
You gotta be able to identify your trees.
So what's bad?
There needs to be some evidence.
Yeah. So what's bad about it? And I think Jerry, you kind of touched on it. So what's bad about the love that these human rights people, this to give everyone their rights people wants to give? What's bad about it?
Well, I kind of think if they raise kids, in a homosexual environment, I kind of feel like when they grow up, they will feel like anything goes. They can pick and choose any lifestyle they want. It's bound to rub off on them, right? That's what I think.
Social evolution is a ever so slow compromise
Mhm.
that takes us.
And we
Who
were
knows where we're going because we know where we've been.
talking about it earlier, me and Randy, about eventually it'll be, okay, what's wrong with one man marrying 7 women or one woman marrying 8 men? Why can't we do that? You know what I mean? It'll slowly get to anything goes, I think.
So
Well, we're kind of getting there anyway.
what's bad about that fruit then?
It's not biblical. It's bad.
It's coming from a bad tree, isn't it? It's coming from a bad tree.
I think it boils down to kind of Randy's social evolution is what Rick has said. One generation rejects, the next accepts.
Embraces, really.
We've seen that.
Oh,
Yeah.
So it's
I
not
mean-
saying more of it.
When you see
Let me-
it, you see a person maybe in ministry who is doing what you see, great things for the church. And then years go by and it turns out that he's not what you thought he was. How do you justify all the good things
Mhm.
that happen?
Right. They don't make up for the other bad.
But God throughout history has used people in positions to still do His
I
will.
think that will go back to, does God justify? Does God need to justify? And the answer is no. Here's a different way I look at that since we talked about trees. So you don't tell me this is just a story I just thought of. So I'm cleaning out my camper trailer up at our farm. And there's mice or whatever that gather up and store stuff back in the back every year. So I go digging in there, and there's the usual acorns and such. And then there's some pecans. So I thought to myself, gosh, I can't believe that acorn tree is now producing pecans, right?
Yeah.
Huh? Or what do you think I thought? What would I have thought? Well, I did not know we had a pecan tree around here, but we must, right? But you see, if I didn't know that, what's wrong with me thinking, gosh, I can't believe now my oak tree is producing pecans, because I got the evidence right there. There are pecans right in there amongst all the acorns. I got a really cool oak tree, right? Well, that's kind of silly,
You
isn't it?
don't tell everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the squirrel somewhere.
yeah, but that's what we're doing with this. That same thing. We see a little bit of good mixed in with the bad, and we say, wow, what a good tree that is. God's seed is everywhere. God says, I can look and see. You can look out and just see how mighty I am everywhere. Do you think some of God's good is not going to get to other folks? I mean, when it says the wide path, do you think the wide path has nothing good in it? Huh?
It probably does.
Does what?
Have good stuff in it, have good in it, but it could be superficial, like what he's discussing or describing a pastor that may go forever doing the right thing and then find out, oh no, it's not the real deal. Surely God has gotten some glory out of that.
Yeah, think another tree thing since we're thinking. Anyone ever burned a pine tree? It get hot? Is it a good tree to burn? No. But it does okay if you don't have nothing else. I'm going to burn that pine tree, aren't I? Not my fireplace, but if I'm camping. Well, same difference. Everything good, everyone that's bad is not all bad. And that's where the problem, and that's where you've got, and I think that's what Jesus is saying here. You've got to look back to the tree. You've got to look back to that tree and say, is that tree a tree that produces good fruit? If not, don't get it. Go back to the original tree. What was wrong with that tree? Adam's and Eve's tree. What was wrong with that tree?
There wasn't anything wrong with the tree,
That said what?
except that he shouldn't eat from it.
Said God said that produces bad fruit, didn't he? Don't pick off that tree. That produces bad fruit. What did they do?
There'd be on for it.
Yeah, they went and they picked it,
Yeah.
and they thought that fruit was good.
It probably was good, tasted good.
Except it came from a bad tree and couldn't be good. And don't we do that all the time? I mean, don't y'all do? Surely you've done something that was pleasurable, that was good, that was whatever. But you knew it wasn't good, didn't you? Was it? Did it usually turn out to be the way you knew it was going to be all along when you looked at the tree and said, gosh, that's a bad tree, but boy, look at that fruit. It's going to be really good. Did it turn out different than that?
It's not usually as good as you thought.
Yeah, or I'll say it's never as good as you thought, is it? It always comes back, and that's kind of what Jesus is saying here is you'll know them by their fruit, but you've got to look at the tree too, and don't be just confused by saying, gosh, there's one piece of good fruit. I can hide one piece of good fruit in that tree. I mean, has anyone ever gone out picking wood out of the woods, and you grab a dead limb out of that tree, out of that nice oak tree, and you go throw it on your fire, and you find out it was actually a piece of pine that fell in and got hung up, and you pull the pine tree. Well, you can hide a piece of good fruit, but you can't. So anyway, a good tree can't produce bad fruit. Neither can a bad tree produce good fruit. Now that one is tough to me. And that's what you're talking about just now, really, I think. A good tree can't produce bad fruit. Neither can a bad tree produce good fruit. Gosh, we need Gene and Janet here to help us with that stuff.
Is he leaving room for repentance?
See, I know people that don't know the Lord, that I know of that don't know the Lord, that is good as gold to do anything in the world for you. Their thoughts, their life, it's shown nothing but like they were a great Christian.
Probably better than some.
But that's works, I guess, that they do. That's good, but their relationship maybe is not there yet.
It's complex when you don't when it's class.
Haley, you're a youngish Christian, so what do you think?
I don't know.
What are we then to do?
What we're told.
So the next verse, every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So you will recognize them by their fruit.
I think we have to cultivate that tree, and that would be studying God's word and making a conscious effort to be a good tree, and that's when we produce good fruit. But if we never water it, just leave it out there and let it do its own thing, then we have a tendency to turn, to
To me,
bad
it's
fruit.
kind of like our baptismal ceremony. We take a 10-year-old, get them under the water, and say, "Rise and walk in newness of life." That's it. How are they supposed to know what it is? I think even at my age, I'm still, and I'm sure Joyce is too, I'm still learning what the newness of life is. And I know I've come up real short. And I don't have time to pull it all together.
And all that's the question. And if you read back and stuff, the predestination or not. But that would be the question is, can you change, or does Jesus change a bad tree into a good tree?
Mhm.
And I think that this is really, you just got to say, do you believe in the predestination bit or not? Because that's where that comes into. If you do believe in that, you say, well, God knew who that good tree was from the start, and they were always good, and you just couldn't tell it. Versus the other way that I probably believe is God can transform me from a bad tree into a good tree. But I don't think it's clear. Anyone got other?
I was just thinking of the thief on the cross. He was probably a bad tree, but turned into a good tree. I mean, he didn't have time to show fruits, right? So yeah, this is a hard one for me to understand.
At the same time, he might have been he might not have been as bad as, he was a thief, right?
Mhm.
Okay, but still, he might have been a very upright, moral thief. and
that is one thing
That's a different kind
I
of
will
thief.
say what you said, Marty. When I absolutely hate teaching lessons that Jesus taught because they are hard. You teach Paul's lessons. Paul tried to make them understandable to people, didn't he? Jesus made them as, they're just so difficult. And that's what we got to realize. We're studying Jesus talking here. And I still say, can you imagine dinner after you just left this Sermon on the Mount? He said, what? Oh, yeah.
Not hungry.
Seriously, but it is, I don't know. So I asked, just say, so is everything that seems good, and I wrote for you, Terry, even by biblical standards, good fruit? Can we produce what appears to be good fruit from a bad tree?
Good question.
What appears to be. It can be, fruit can be really nice looking on the outside, and it can be rotten on the inside.
Kind of like avocados.
I'm going to give someone an assignment who wants it. If y'all would pray for God to answer these questions for us this week, be sure you write them down so next week you can say.
Well, what is your answer? You think you can have good fruit from a bad tree?
I get to ask the questions in here.
That's
Let's read the Bible. Leader, would you tell us?
The evidence says yes, but Jesus says no. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And again, that there's a difference. It's like, as humans, we see like, whoa, that guy's doing a good job. He's a Christian. He's doing Christian stuff.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
evidence.
Well, here is one thing that I think is where Jesus answered it a little bit, 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. So I can do good and it still not be God's will, can't I?
Yes. How do you know?
I think if it's God's will, I believe if you know that you're one of His, if you truly are a saved individual, I believe then you know that the things that you do, the works that you do, are for His honor and glory. If you are not one of His and you're still doing good things, I think that's self-satisfactory. It's like, I'm doing good here. This should be enough.
Like we talked about last week with the Pharisees.
Yeah.
You know, everything they did was for outside
Yeah.
appearance and self-satisfaction.
You know, one of the hardest things that I ever did in my recovery process, the training process was to do something for someone else without telling anybody.
Mhm.
And it's hard if you really try to do it.
I'm guessing a chance of split personality. One being saved, one being lost. That's how it is.
Well, that is that human nature, that sin nature thing we talk about. And I go back. God says, I will be transformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ. That means there's a time where
Where you were bad fruit.
I'm kind of both, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so, yes, it does. I don't know the answer. My comment was, and we talked about last week, so maybe it also matters how we do good.
You know, what I find interesting is the good fruit, the bad fruit. According to God's word, there's no amount of time to it just says it'll be thrown in, chopped down and thrown in the fire, period. And over in 3:10, it says the axe is already laid at the root of the trees. I mean, he doesn't give the time to, stand back. I mean, the action's about to take place right there. And, we can discuss it. I don't know the answer to it.
Me neither.
I ask, and I'm going to ask again, and this is where that comes to. Do you know what kind of tree you are?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, I'm one of the few that live.
And how do you know?
because I'm a child.
Because you're a child of God and you know the Spirit lives in you, don't you? You are therefore a good tree. If I was to ask, Gene, do you know you're a good tree? Well, absolutely, no question about it. And so, how do you know? You must know. And that's what I guess I would tell anyone. Everyone in here is saved. Do you know that you're saved? And how do you know that?
The Holy Spirit confirms that.
It
When you
confirms
do
it.
something, you're going to be
And,
convicted.
and I will still say again, and if you don't know that, I think you're in real danger of being one of these who says, Lord, Lord, but will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And so I don't think there is any question of what kind of tree you are once you have accepted the Holy Spirit into your life. Now the problem is what we talked about earlier to me, that predestination thing or whatever. Do I have the potential to be a good tree if I'm a bad tree now?
Yeah.
Well, again, my thinking is yes. So I go back, if I want to talk about predestination, Randy, you would say, so what's wrong with predestination? And here it is, so when you argue that, predestination implies time. Therefore, God cannot be determined. He can't predetermine anything. Why is that?
Time. No time. He's timeless.
Because
Yeah.
time doesn't apply to him. So predestination is a word we put on Christ we put on God to say he lives in time. But for God, who is Jesus? The one who was and is and always will be. And so that's a problem that I think we have come up with, is predestination, to say, well, does God know I'm going to be saved the day I'm born? Well, he says he knows everything I'm going to do the day I'm born. In fact, before I'm even more than one cell, he knows everything I'm going to do. So of course he knows that. But nevertheless, that's what I will say. You better know what kind of tree you are. If you don't know what kind of tree you are, you better go looking. Now, we'll go back then. Does that mean that everyone who produces bad fruit is a bad tree?
No.
I think it says yes, but I feel like it's probably because we're convicted by things that even if we make bad choices, that eventually something good's going to grow from it. That's my thinking. At least I hope, because I know that my fruits doesn't always seem very good.
And I think that is it seems to say that, I'm going to use a different thing. Anyone like to garden? No. Well, I like to grow tomatoes. Anyone grow tomatoes ever?
I give up.
Are all of them good when you go pick them off?
Never again.
No. They're not. I mean, you grab a tomato and it looks wonderful, and you cut in it and the worms got in there. So I don't know how that works, but I do know this. If I want a good tomato, what do I need to go looking on?
The vine.
A tomato plant, don't I? I'm not going to get a good tomato off my squash plant, am I? and so that's what I say. If you know what you are, you also are going to recognize that bad fruit, and you're trying. And I think that is the conforming to Christ. I'll say, is what was good fruit to you 10 years ago necessarily good fruit today?
Well, the plan of salvation states that we're all bad trees until we're saved.
And then that's why I said then we will be conformed to the likeness of Christ, so that we enter heaven, we enter as inheritance to God's kingdom, or co-inheritors. And so that's what it means, is to me, it just means you're going to start here. And I ask, so is necessarily good fruit what was good to you 10 years ago? I say, I don't know how long Haley's been a Christian, but let's say she's been a Christian for 10 years. Is what you would have done as 10 years of a Christian?
No, because for me, as I grow in the Word, I realize some things that I thought were okay. Oh, it doesn't line up with God's Word. I gotta,
Or even some things you thought were really, really good.
Exactly. Same. Yeah.
And so that is, you're going to grow, and you're going to learn that while that was good then, now I can see that that's not quite good enough. And so it is a tough thing. So last part then, this one's a little easier, I think, is rock versus sand. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who builds his house on the rock. The rain fell, the rivers rose, and the winds blew and pounded that house, yet it didn't collapse because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the winds blew and pounded that house, and it collapsed. And its collapse was great. So how do we build a solid house?
Good foundation.
Salvation.
And how do we build a good sound foundation then?
Salvation.
See, on Jesus.
Huh?
On Jesus. He's our
Yeah, I mean,
foundation.
Solid rock.
Solid rock, solid.
you have to hear the word.
The ground was sinking sand.
You have to hear the word and act on it. Back to James. There is no works there is no salvation without works. Right? Isn't that what James said?
Works will be the
Salvation
result of
without
your
works.
salvation.
Therefore, if you don't have works, you can't be saved. That's what James said. That's what I think this is saying. If I hear God's word and don't act on them, it doesn't matter what I say, I'm not saved. If I hear God's word, I will act on them, and that is that solid foundation. And that's very difficult, because is salvation based on works? Before I finish, so I make sure I don't confuse it.
No.
No, absolutely not. If I have salvation, will I have works?
Yes.
Yes. And that's how you know what you built your house on, okay? I'm trying to think of someone, I don't know, Bill Gates, who's an atheist, who actually tries to be pretty good.
Mhm.
Do we look the same? Do we act the same, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do, don't we?
Yeah.
Is his house built on rocks? No, it's not. Why? Because he's not doing what he's doing because it's God's instruction. He's just doing it. I have to hear the word of Jesus, accept him into my heart, and then do the works if I'm going to do. And that's how you know what kind of tree you are. You will know what kind of tree you are how? By your fruit. If I say I am saved, if I say, Lord, Lord, but I have no fruit, then what? Then I'm not saved, am I?
You know, but I think we should clarify what fruit looks like, because some folks might think that the fruit of salvation is being a soul winner and you know, an evangelist, not being a minister. But at the same time, could it be your fruit is being an example the way you're living your life for, you know, saying, see what I'm saying? You can't. Some people just stereotype works has got to be people that are on fire and going out there and sharing the word, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that's what works. I mean, that's what the fruit is.
I read something the other day, Randy, that kind of made an impression on me. It said, my mission is wherever I'm standing and whoever I'm talking to. That simplified it for me.
I think you can turn this off. Thank y'all.
Now you can have a dead looking tree, but you can print it and it comes back. And they may look dead for years and years and years.
That is true. And